With fewer than 4 weeks to go in this legislative session, lawmakers are hard at work trying to pass a budget that Governor Lamont will eventually sign. And as negotiations continue, groups across Connecticut are expressing the need for funds, especially as the state is in a rare surplus. Joining us now is the Connecticut Nonprofit Alliance President and CEO, John Carl Casa, and Heather Latorre from Marrakech. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Perfect. So tell me, who makes up the Nonprofit Alliance? What groups?
The Nonprofit Alliance is a statewide organization. It represents nonprofits that do a lot of the work for the people of Connecticut so the state doesn't have to. They provide shelter to people who need it. They provide addiction services for people who need that. They provide mental health services, services for people with disabilities, and a wide range of other services on which people depend. And nonprofits in Connecticut until this past year had not gotten a significant increase in state funding since 2007. And in all that time, they've lost 46% of their buying power. So it's very important, now that the state has a $3 billion surplus, that they get helped and they get some of that funding back.
So kind of a coalition of all these different nonprofits in our state. And Heather, what is Marrakech? What do you do here in Connecticut?
Marrakech Incorporated has been around for 51 years. We support people with developmental disabilities, people with mental health and addiction needs. We have a drop-in center for people who are homeless. We support people without disabilities as well. We have Academy for Human Service Training. So we really support a very diverse population, and we have 650 of the best staff in Connecticut that work really hard to provide these great services to people.
Well, so Jean Carl, you told me you worked in the state's Office of Policy and Management, so you're familiar with the budget negotiation process that we're in right now. You started talking about that a little bit. So what specifically is the Nonprofit Alliance looking for from this legislative session's budget?
The last 2 years, inflation felt by nonprofits has been about 16%. So we're asking over the biennial budget to make up for that, to get 9% increase the first year and 7% increase the second year.
Perfect. So many nonprofits are saying they have record need because of the pandemic, and as you just said, because of inflation. Do you believe our state's nonprofits need more? We'll start with you and then go to Heather.
They absolutely need more. I mean, they have been behind for many years. When I was working for the state had very tight budgets. It was very difficult to provide the funding necessary for nonprofits and others to do jobs that they need to do. Now that the state has a $3 billion surplus, we think it's time that some of that be made up.
And what are you specifically seeing in regards to Marrakech?
So actually, I've been at Marrakech for the past 37 years, so I've seen good times in the state and bad times in the state. And we've always been providing really quality services, cost effective, and the state makes sure we have the outcomes that they're looking for. So now I see record numbers of people on our waiting list. We had one opening at one of our group homes for young adults with autism. We have 30 referrals for one slot that need placement. I've never seen that. We also have a waiting list for months for our day programs. So we have people who might live at home with their parents that their parents can't work because they can't leave their son or daughter alone, and they're waiting as well. So we see waiting lists, and then we also see heroes working for very low wages. And 1% is not going to cut the mustard for them as well to live in Connecticut.
You bring up that 1%. Tell me a little bit about that reaction. We have multiple budget proposals. We have 4 now at the table for these negotiations. But in regards to the governor's budget, you mentioned that 1%. You know, he's saying this is still an increase, and Nonprofit Alliance is saying it isn't enough. So Heather, I'll start with you and then go to you.
Yeah, you know, we think that what we're hearing from legislative leaders and the governor himself is that they recognize that nonprofits need more than what has been provided in the proposed budget so far. And we're hoping that that is a lot closer to the 9% nonprofits really need to do the job. They're behind closed doors right now. They're doing negotiations, so we don't know exactly where we stand. But we're encouraged that there are folks out there talking about nonprofit needs in the legislature.
And you brought up that 1%. What was your initial reaction to the governor's proposal?
I actually came to work on Monday, and my staff pulled me into the office and said, 1%? Do you know what inflation is? And I said, that doesn't mean that that's where they're ending, don't worry. And that's why we have to make sure that our legislators know we're a team of 500,000 people in Connecticut that have their friends, their acquaintances, their family and loved ones that have a disability, that have a need, an immediate essential need. It's not the type of contract that this state has that, you know, if they don't provide the services, it's okay. We would see people in hospitals and emergency rooms, in the street, dead. It's 1% is really not a good thing.
So everyone's trying to get a little bit of that, of the pie, a little bit of that budget surplus. So Republicans in their budget proposals and with the comptroller's office, they're really pushing for the child tax credit to continue as part of this as well. And you all said you were happy to see that, to see a push for the child tax credit?
You know, yes, that would be helpful. There are a lot of needs that have gone unmet over the last few years. And the state is in a rare position with a surplus of $3 billion plus a rainy day fund of more than $3 billion. So finally it has the means to meet a lot of the needs that have gone without. We don't think that there need to be a choice of nonprofits over others. We think the state can do a lot. They can help nonprofits and still make some of the other investments that they've been talking about.
And Heather, between you and other nonprofits, you've been saying how much you've allocated of that surplus. It really speaks to how much the state prioritizes your work. Do you feel prioritized this session?
It's hard to feel valued. It's hard for the people that we support and their families and people on waiting lists. How are they valued if they're on waiting lists? And definitely our heroes that worked through COVID, that moved into our group homes and kept people safe. How is that saying you're valued? It's not.
So these budget negotiations ongoing, under 4 weeks left. Have you been in contact with the governor's office, with lawmakers? What are you hearing so far about any movement or any not movement on part of this?
Well, you never really know exactly where negotiations stand, but we are up here every day. People like Heather come up every day and they talk to legislators. We have folks calling the governor's office, calling legislators, and politely explaining what the situation is and what the needs are. You know, when you talk about nonprofits, it's not just the organization as some kind of corporate entity. It's really the human beings that depend on the services that they need.
What about you, Heather? What have you been hearing?
I have been optimistic. I've always been. That's how I stayed in the field for so long. And when I see the legislators' bipartisan support for people with disabilities, I just hope that the budget, you know, comes out that way as well.
And greater about the legislative session as a whole quickly. You know, as you said, your membership covers so many different programs and people in the state, and obviously the budget is on a deadline, but so are legislative proposals with just a couple weeks left. So is there anything in particular you're watching closely or prioritizing this session?
Other than the budget?
Yeah, other than the budget.
You know, we find that, for instance, nonprofits in some areas of funding may have a little bit left over the course of the year. We believe that when they have some left over, they should be allowed to put that back into services so they can continue to meet the needs and to work on things like the waiting lists that Heather was describing.
And Heather, I know you were both talking about being up at the state capitol, calling lawmakers. Any message to people who this is also a priority for them? They want their lawmakers to fund this. What can people do? What should they know?
Well, I definitely think that some people feel that, well, John Carl could do everything, or Heather and a couple execs could do everything, but really everyone needs to make sure that their legislators know that this is a priority, that people are important. That's why I live in Connecticut. Connecticut values people, and there are so many relatives and friends and people related to people with disabilities that need a service, that need a help to get a job, whatever it is, and that they should definitely help us in calling their legislators, emailing, coming with us to Hartford, and saying that we need a COLA, a significant COLA. value Connecticut, value our people.
A lot of different priorities this session, and we'll see a lot of movement, I think, in these last couple weeks as they get closer to that final budget proposal. Well, thank you so much again for being here with me this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.